What's up, guys? Mitch from Respect My Region back with another episode of the North American Weed Tour podcast. Today, I have a very good friend of mine, Mr. Chilly Mack, founder of Mr.
Hey,
Macks, and a bunch of other stuff, man. I don't want to define him by just that, but for the sake of a brief intro, I'll keep it just at that, man. How you doing today?
man, I'm good, man. Blessed and highly favored. You know how the saying go. How are you?
Man, I'm living, man. I'm definitely doing good. This is I think my third podcast episode of the day, so I've been stacking up
Oh,
content.
so you getting it today?
Yeah,
I'm trying to, I'm trying to share this to my feed.
but I got you on last because I didn't need to do much preparation for this because we just spoke about a week ago to get caught up with what you're doing, and I'm
Yep.
familiar with your rise, and so, and I'm just excited to have you on here for a multitude of reasons, man. I mean, you're coming, you I met you up here in the Washington State market, so you understand what's
Yes,
going on
sir.
here. You're down there in Oklahoma and really been, one of the pioneers out there. And then now, obviously, you're breaking into other markets. So you just you got, again, like I said, I can't define you in just one title, but I also can't define my excitement of the topics that I'd like to cover with you in just one topic, man.
Man, I mean, you said you was, happy to see my rise, bro. Like, I mean, we talked about this. Me and Joey talked about this too. Like, you guys were a part of the rise, though. You know what I mean? Like, no games aside, no BS. Like, so forever grateful to you guys.
Man, one and appreciate that, man. I know what you shared with me last time. That definitely it means a lot to me, man, because that's ultimately what we do this for is to provide a platform to provide inspiration, connect dots. And so
Mm,
when we get some of those stories where that stuff actually happens, it's like the mission that we really set out, what we really want to, I mean, obviously we want to make money and we want to do cool things, but at the end of the
right, right.
day, like the real purpose is like the real like what you shared with me, that real shit, like that's the motivation to keep going.
Facts, big facts.
So Mr. Macks, the brand, actually, I'm gonna back it up. So we'll talk
Okay.
about you, and then we'll move on to the brand. So Chilly Mack, I believe, and I might be correct. I should have actually confirmed this before, but I know you have music industry background as an A&R and a manager. Correct? Is there other? I'm sure you've worn other titles in the industry, as most people have too.
Yeah, I mean, it started at we talking about, like the 2000 era, like beginning of 2000. So, back then it was working your way up into stuff. So, I mean, everything from, working in the mail room to, being a grip or something on video sets. But eventually, yeah, I worked my way into being a A&R and a artist manager,
Yeah.
specifically doing artist development.
And so part of that, I would say what you probably enjoyed the most was being able to help guide someone on their journey and then also be able to identify some of those unique things about them and connect some pieces. Trying to draw some lines with what you're doing now and back then. That makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I'm one of those people that I try to learn from my mistakes, but more importantly, I try to learn from other people's mistakes. And with the music piece, I was able to take every one of my failures and actually turn it into um, a teachable moment, a teachable lesson, right? And if I have any gift, people always try and give me all of these, hats and accolades or attributes. But I think my biggest gift is being able to identify talent, right? And that translated, from music into radio and into cannabis and other things. So it's all one big old, chicken pot pie.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and that's another thing I think why you and I obviously have related on many levels for a long time. Love for music, love for cannabis,
Yep.
long time love for both. So many people pigeonhole it where, oh, rap, especially because I deal with a lot of hip hop. Hip hop music and
Mm,
cannabis go hand in hand. Well, like, yeah, they do, but for me personally, they definitely go hand in hand. But I also have very separate interest in both. Like
right.
I don't just, I listen to music when I consume cannabis, and when I make music, I definitely consume cannabis, but that's not the whole, I'm also really nerd out about the cannabis and I really nerd
Mm.
out about the music, which I know you're far more levels greater on the cannabis than myself. Um, So could you give me a little bit of your journey in cannabis? I'm aware of it, but I think it's a very powerful story.
Yeah, so I had this cousin named JoJo, and JoJo is the reason that we talking right now. JoJo was our older cousin, and he was more of a connoisseur. And so he taught me the differences and indicas and sativas and the different attributes that different strains have and why this is effective for this, but this not this. And so he's the one that built that curiosity in me. I'm curious by nature, but he put the cannabis curiosity into me. And so, I suffer from fibromyalgia and neuromyotonia, and those are both two neurological disorders. And I was having a tough time, like finding consistent strains that work for my conditions. Because one thing with NMT and fibromyalgia is it attacks the body in different ways in different places. So there isn't a true, fix all for that. And that's what kind of got me into breeding. And when I got into breeding, I ended up creating Blues Clues and PT Mac and a few other strains. And I was like, I really need to like do something with this, right? And so that's what brought me to Washington. I ended up, leaving here, going to Washington to, try and make that happen. And it was like a lot of other, um, failed stories, where people they leave where they at, they go somewhere else and they get things built out and stuff is looking real nice and plants is growing and then something happens and you end up belly up on that op. So now it's like, all right, fuck it, I'll go out and I'll get my own license and do my own thing. And had issues trying to move it from Okanagan to Spokane County. So that was another hurdle in itself, And I was at a point, where I was like, am I going to do this? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And we talked about this, and I got invited to your event, and that was, the event that was the determining factor for me. If I just said, forget it, I tried, I lost, I'm gonna just go back to what I know how to do, was what's been taking care of me, or do I keep putting my foot on the gas. And that event, it was that defining moment. The conversations that took place during that event was the ones that was just like, what, it filled my gas tank up and it allowed me to push forward. And even though it didn't happen out there, there was the rumblings of 788 here. And my partner called me and was like, yo, if this go, when are you coming home? And I was like, shit, I'll be home the next day. But I'm thinking it's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, Oklahoma, that is, Oklahoma and Utah will be the last two states to
Right.
legalize. This is my thought, right? And it happened, and I came back, and we basically took that framework, that blueprint that we had built there, and incorporated it here with a few pivots. But I mean, that's really the how it started to how it came here.
Yeah. And that's an awesome thing because I remember like one of the first times I met with you and you just described your story going from a patient to a breeder to an
Hmm.
edible or I don't even, just a chef, a pastry chef, not even an edible chef, a
Hmm.
pastry chef, and how you kind of were able to combine this professional know-how with this medical know-how to create strains that help specific conditions, but then also
Hmm.
put them in baked goods, right? Because like
Hmm.
it's very common in the medical world where there's patients that can't smoke or don't want
Right.
to inhale smoke
Yep.
for one reason or another. Um, and then it's just been awesome to hear your story and then see you opening ground obviously on the many endeavors that you've been able
Hmm.
to do in the Oklahoma market and now beyond. What kind of was the first thing that you felt like you got known in the Oklahoma market for? Was it the store? Was it the baked goods? Was it just the overall brand? Which one do you feel like really kind of led the charge out there?
So when we decided, you know, that we were gonna do this here because it just seemed like a easier route. We had to really like evaluate what we were doing because when we were in Washington, you know, everything was based around the strains. It was all based around, you know, our us getting our genetics out there, us getting our flower into the market, linking up with a good processor to get good concentrates, et cetera, right? But when that the whole boat shifted from Washington to Oklahoma, we reevaluated it and we're like, well, hey, I don't know. It's Oklahoma. We're in the Bible Belt. People may not be very receptive to smoking. People may not be, you know, very receptive to, you know, just the onslaught of strains and growers that they were going to face. So we start looking at where the gaps in the market going to
Mm,
be that we can actually fill. And I'm a pastry chef by trade, so it was like, you know, we really looked at it and we're like, you know, the edibles, topicals, and tinctures is going to be the market that, you know, people are going to go after, but they're not going to be able to, you know, get good quality stuff because everybody's going to be starting from ground zero and we already on the 10th floor, you know. And so we when we originally launched, we did, you know, some mixers and stuff like that beforehand. So people were getting familiar with the brand. We had already started our social medias in Washington and everything like that. So those were a little more established versus other people who were starting from day one. So it was really the branding that set us apart from everyone else because, you know, while everyone else was literally, and I mean literally, in either Ziploc bags with a label or saran wrap and a label, we were actually in printed bags.
mm.
And we gave that look, that feel, that impression of an out of state national brand. So that allowed us to separate ourselves early from everybody else because while everyone else is dealing with mold and, you know, mildew and just, you know, untasty products. Here we are, you know, with recipes that I've literally been making since the 90s,
Mm.
and just pushing that forward.
Yeah, yeah. When did you, so in the 90s is when you started just the pastry chef and you know, journey, or did you start
Mm,
using cannabis at that in cooking at that time as well, or when did that kind of start?
Nah, so I mean, you know, like anybody else, we, you know, took some Reggie and made some brownies in the 90s and stuff like that, right? But the actual science part of it, you know, I went to school and I finished in 96, 95. Um, and so these were all recipes that I had been making: caramel, hard candies, cheesecakes, all of these things that we make now. I've been making them for years, so it's like, you know, ingrained in me, right? But I got into the cooking with it probably, I would say around 2010, 2011. I started getting into, like, you know, the olive oils and the butters and stuff like that. And then, you know, trying to find ways to refine that a little more. Because, you know, I mean, naturally with any type of chef, regardless of what the concentration is, right? The objective is to make sure that whatever it is, it's palatable, right? And we didn't want to take away from, you know, the flavor of a really good caramel with, you know, a crazy, you know, weed flavor. We
Hmm.
didn't want to, you know, so we're looking at ways that we could dial that back, or ways that we could mask it with certain things. And so that was, you know, how that played out. But when I got super serious with the cooking part of it was probably around 2014, right before I went to Washington. That's when I started like expanding and exploring with different things, you know, confections versus baked goods versus condiments and different stuff like that.
Yeah, because that's I liked your approach, right? Because definitely back in the day when we were, you know, when everybody was making brownies, it was, you know, take the trim. I mean, the
Yep.
damn near just the plant matter, what was left on the
Yep.
stock, you know,
Yep.
cook that in some oil. You know, half the time I didn't even strain it out, so it was just a crunchy
Yep.
brownie, you know.
Yep.
And you're eating it for functionality. You know, I'm just eating it to get high. I'm not eating it to have a good brownie, right? And
Right.
so moving into the legal market, and yourself even kind of in the medical market, predating recreation, your interest to
Hmm.
recreational market, taking that approach of like, how do I make something that tastes good and still
Hmm.
has functionality to it?
Yeah, yeah. That's really been, the some of the big differences.
Yeah. And so what do you think, like, because I think a lot of people that first came in the market, and I'm not trying to bash on anyone, but I think a lot of people that
Hmm.
first came in the market just made, low grade edibles with low grade distillate in it, and didn't really look at how do we make something where these flavors work together, where these
Hmm.
compounds really work together. Um, and I think, would you say that just your experience as being a chef just made you be like, I gotta make this taste good? Or were you really trying to get the best of both worlds of like, this has got to be functional and it's got to taste good? Kind of what was the ethos behind that?
Yeah, so it's always been 50-50, right? The two main components are consistency and effectiveness, right? And if we're consistent in the recipe and we know what our source material is, we can be consistent in its efficacy, right? And for a lot of people, when we first started, we're talking about liters being 25,000 for distillate. So a lot of people weren't going that route. They were going with, they're gonna buy somebody's trim or they're gonna do this. So there was a dramatic, gap, valley, gorge, whatever you want to call it, between our stuff and literally everybody else's stuff. Because, the program started October 26th. We entered the market November 4th. We were like the first or second edible brand to like hit the market. And again, it's like, do you go with this that tastes extremely like weed? Yeah, it'll get you where you need to, but are you experiencing upset stomach? Are you having bubble guts? Do you got the burps? Do you got gas, et cetera, et cetera? Because people, this was new to everybody, right? So they were on, they had been accustomed to making edibles for a party or to last, a couple of days, nothing to be packaged, nothing to be put on the shelf and have to be there for an extended period of time. So we knew that was one of our advantages as well. And we really kept it simple. We don't do, the cereal treats with the marshmallows and the chocolate drizzle and all of that extra stuff, because that's extra stuff that the body has to process. We keep it simple. We took simple products, hard candies, lollipops, gummies, caramel, and those were our edibles. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's just hitting that note time after time after time. If I go in the store and I buy Werther's, the Werther's caramel, if I buy the hard caramel or the soft caramel, it's gonna taste the exact same every single time.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? They don't have to worry about doing no foo-foo stuff and putting no extras on it or anything, because that product itself, the reputation behind that consistency and flavor, smoothness, whatever you want to call it, you're going to get that every single time. And other people were literally just trying to figure it out. So this week they got this edible, and then the next
Hmm.
week there's a new version of the same edible, but it's something different. So people didn't even have time to really like grab a hold of anything, because everybody else was still plugging and playing and doing their trials to figure out what they wanted to do.
And that's the thing, right? Of moving past baking in your kitchen to,
Mhm.
you know, I don't, again, I don't mean to disrespect, but a janky kitchen or brand, to
Right.
moving into understanding cannabis is a CPG market, or in medical markets is
Hmm.
moving towards a traditional CPG market,
Yeah.
and consumers are going to have CPG expectations of the product. You can't,
Yep.
like you said, I can't go in and buy a Hershey's bar and be like, well, last week's batch was better, I'll try again next week and hope it was as
Hmm.
good. It doesn't work like that. Maybe
Right.
flour and wine, right? We can talk about different
Hmm.
harvests, but
Hmm.
when you talk about an edible product, consistency is the number one thing. It has got to be consistent out the gate.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I got two smaller questions I want to ask, and this might be difficult, and I don't know. What is your favorite medium to infuse? Is it butter, coconut oil, vegetable oil, like your starting base, I guess, to make? What is your preferred? You might have different ones for different occasions, but what do you prefer
Well,
the most?
I don't really. So that's gonna be contingent on the end result. Like, so for hard candies and lollipops, right? Hard candies, lollipops, gummies. We use coconut oil base, right? The reason we use the coconut oil as a carrier is, unlike butter, it's going to be less greasy. It has, a lower melting point, and it's going to be a better carrier of the medicine, right? But with those three particular products, the hard candy, the lollipop, the gummy, we don't do a pectin gummy. So that's technically, those pectin-based gummies technically aren't gummies. They're classified as a jelly in the
Mm,
confection world. Um, the gelatin base are considered gummies. So like there's specifics when it comes to confections. Well, the gelatin-based gummy is chewier, so that's gonna stay in the mouth a little bit longer, giving you a sublingual delivery versus something that's gonna be swallowed and then, processed by the kidneys or the
mm,
liver, or whatever it may be. And the same thing with the hard candy and the lollipop; those are going that's going to be a sublingual delivery. So it's a faster onset. It's designed to appeal to certain issues. Um, but for products like our caramel, that's a butter base. That medicated period is going to last a little bit longer. It'll be a little more intense, and it's more on the quote unquote savory side, right? But then when I go into things like, a tincture, that may be MCT oil. Or if we go into, topicals, one topical, it'll be olive oil base. And then the other topical, it'll be a different base. So it's really going to be contingent on that product type and what the desired effect from that product
mm.
is intended to be. So I truly don't have a favorite.
You don't even have a preference of,
Nah.
well, so I then that was going to be my next question was going to be, what is your favorite edible, like favorite finished good? And it sounds like you might have a hard time picking that one as
Okay,
well.
so on the menu, I would say it's either going to be the caramel or the caramel apple pop pop. Um, Off the menu, it'll probably be our toffee or our chocolate. Those are both two product lines we haven't dropped yet. Kind of like the caramel. I'm a R&D the shit out of it, right? And I'm a work it and I'm a work it and I'm a work it like this tea we getting ready to drop pretty soon. I've been working on this over a year.
Mm,
The caramel and the toffee, I've been working on that 2 years. So when it drops though, there won't be another toffee like it. There
yeah.
won't be another chocolate like it. There won't be another tea like it. Just like there's not another caramel like ours. There's not another tincture like ours. So.
And so
Try to do it up.
from a product development and just brand positioning, I feel like I know the answer to this, but how much do you pay attention to what else is on the market, and how much do you go QA, like what else is out there?
So that's one thing that me and my partner are pretty good at. He will go out, and if he sees something, he gonna pick it up, right? If it's something different, if it's something new, if it's a competitor, whatever it may be, he's gonna pick it up. And then we'll literally bring it back to the office, and me, him, and Kevin will take a look at it, we'll sample it or whatever, and we'll grade it, And we're not grading it on against hours per se. We're grading it according to a scale, according to a scorecard. And then we're evaluating where we feel that product sits. Then we look at other things like, what's their price point in the market? How many stores do we see these particular products in? Are wholesalers and distributors moving them? Is it strictly, processor directly to dispensary? Like, we pay attention to all of that kind of stuff because, at the end of the day, you know, Pepsi may not care about Coke's new formula, right? But Pepsi care about Coke's market share.
Mhm.
Pepsi cares about, Coke's, outreach and, community, services and all of the different things that Coke is doing, they're going to pay attention to that and then evaluate what they're doing against what Pepsi is doing and figure out how to either make it match or exceed it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. We definitely look at all of the different products and product types that are out there, and we actually look at the public's feedback. Because I mean, anybody will come in and say, "Oh man, those pop pops be kicking and blah 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 blah," right? But they know that that's ours. They may be cool with us or
Right.
whatever. So that feedback is kind of like the music industry, right? That 13 block radius. The people within that 13 blocks, they know you, they love you, they want to see you do good. So even though your music may be shit, they're gonna support it. And it's the same way with this, right? It's very clicky. And people that's your boy, that's your homegirl or whatever. So bam, we gonna automatically, say that this is good. We don't any good feedback that comes to us, we receive it, but we're more concerned with the negative feedback.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Because I mean,
mm,
I don't want to be praised. I want to know what's wrong so I can be better.
right.
You know what I mean? My objective is what Jimmy Iovine say: kill, kill, kill. That is my objective. You know what I mean? And if I'm sitting back being praised, I got my feet up. But
Yeah.
if I'm working on my critiques and I'm working on the things that patients and actual consumers feel like is making their experience better with our products, like that's my focus.
Absolutely. I mean, and I agree. I think that's crucial. I used to like feel weird about giving people critical feedback, when they
Mhm.
ask, hey, what do you like think about this? And it's not, maybe it's not my favorite, but it's not, you kind of dance around it. And now it's like, you don't got to
Right.
be a dick, but being honest, right? Like, hey,
There it
this,
is.
this was advertised as this. And, for me, at least for me, it didn't really work like that, and because
Right.
that's something like exactly what you're saying. Like, I can't do nothing with, oh, this was the best. You're like, great. Unless 100% of customer reviews say that, then you're on the right path. But
Right.
you can't do much with that unless it's a high volume, great sample size. You need that.
Yep.
Hey, the packaging, this bag's a little too thick or so, whatever. And you're like, okay, bet. Now I can look into that more. Okay, I can adjust that. I can change it and
Hmm.
perfect the delivery and yeah,
Yep.
that critical feedback. But so many people, and I love to hear that you say that because so many people, and from music, they can't they can't handle the
Nah,
critical
not
feedback.
at all. Not at all. It's almost like you cuss their mother out on Sunday in front of the church.
Right, right. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you get better? Nobody walks in the gym shooting 100% from beyond the arc, man.
Right.
You got to get better. You got to improve your form. Um, I wanted to ask you. So, obviously, you got this brand started in Oklahoma. It was one of the more exciting markets that the country has seen over the
Hmm.
last probably 2 years, I guess. Um, what is your thoughts on the ground? They opened up licenses, so people for a second were praising it as this haven. You could go in, you could easily get a license, get your operation, and then of
Hmm.
course the downside of that, a year and a half into it, we have an oversupply. There's too many stores. There's too many
Hmm.
licenses. Being on the ground floor, like, what do you kind of see going on right now, and like, what's the report on the Oklahoma market?
So I mean, it's a mixed bag of tricks, right? If if you're asking, the patients and the advocates and activists, it's everything is great, right? It's a free market, people can find whatever it is that they need, and if somebody wants to give it a shot, they can jump in and just run and go, right? But from an operational standpoint, um, when cap the when you basically cap the demand, but you're not capping the supply,
Mm,
you run into situations like Oregon, right, where you have this surplus, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we were paying 25,000 for liters. I can get a liter right now for 2,800. You know what I mean? So just in a 36-month period, the value of a liter of distillate went from 25,000 to 2,800. And what people aren't understanding is, you know, as the price comes down and there's, we're sitting at like 8,600 growers right now, 2,200 dispensaries right now. We're over 12,000 licenses for the state, and we only have 340,000, I'm sorry, 380,000 people in the program in a state that only has 3.4 million people. So when you start breaking these numbers down, right, and you got 380,000 patients, 2,200 dispensaries, that averages out to like 160 patients per dispensary. But once you factor in, product availability, dispensary preference, so on and so forth, that 160 rapidly then drop down to like 50. Is 50 patients a sustainable model for business where you on the street where just going from 89 to 59 there's 27 dispensaries,
Right.
right? So now you're talking about $10 eighths. The quality of the product is way down, and at a certain point, if I'm a say I'm vertical, right, or say I'm not vertical, say I'm a processor. If I'm relying on buying someone's, flour or trim or whatever it may be, I'm buying it at this super low price, right? But I also have to sell what I make at a super low price as well. And if the flour is $2 or $3 a gram and the concentrate is $5, $6 a gram, is it worth it for me as a company to produce concentrates?
Mm,
Probably not. So if I'm not producing concentrates, that means I'm not making distillate. That means I'm not making RSO. That means I'm not making all of these other things that lead into all of these other processed goods. So
mm.
your topicals, your tinctures, your edibles, like all your carts, all of that stuff, and you're going to see fewer and fewer of that because it's just not. It makes no sense for me to be in business to lose money ultimately.
Right.
So that's the downside to it, because there's there's no real end in sight. Like fresh frozen is like $40 a pound. I can get premium, and the difference in the grade. So you can get premium outdoor for like 300 a pound. Good indoor for like 11, 12, 1,300 a pound. And the difference is a lot of the retailers aren't reflecting those savings. So it looked like we gouging people when they really didn't haggle us down. And now
Right.
what would have been a 30% profit margin is 5% profit margin.
Mm,
So I mean, it has its good and its bad. It looks good from the outside. If you're looking at it from another state, it's like we don't have no qualifying conditions, so anybody can be a patient. Getting in is having somebody that has residency and 2,500 bucks, and you off to the races. So there, people aren't really having to put skin in the game to get in the game, and therefore I think a lot of people don't appreciate the
mm.
access to the game. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh well, I just take my tax return and I'm good. Oh, I'll just take my stimulus check and I'm good. And literally, this is what people are doing. But then you have other people who don't know anything about this at all. They've invested all of their 401k. They've done this. They've done that, thinking that this is going to be a retirement plan, and they're working harder than they ever worked in their life.
Mm.
So it depends on whose eyes you're looking through, that determines if it's great or if it's not great.
Yeah, and for our viewers out there that are on the West Coast, right? He mentioned that there's over 2,000 dispensaries in the state of Oklahoma. There is not 2,000 dispensaries on the entire West Coast
Right,
between Washington, Oregon, and
right,
California. I think it's like
right.
16 to 1,800 if you count up
Hmm.
all three states.
Yep.
Significantly larger population without the medical. Everyone over the age of
Right.
21 is a potential customer, whereas you guys are limited to who holds a card, and
Hmm.
that is just not, it's not a sustainable market.
No,
And
not as is. No.
no.
I mean, so there's talks from the legislation. I play a pretty decent role in that field as well. But there's a talk from the legislation about potentially raising license fees and maybe doing some caps. I don't see that any of that happening this year because we're in an election year, and the governor's trying to do some cleanup work to get reelected. I don't think he really wants to ruffle the feathers of the
Sure.
industry because more people voted for cannabis than they did for the governor. So every elected official, feels like they're in danger if they go against it. You know what I mean? But they also don't want to be out there and be like, yeah, I'm for it. So
Right. That's a funny stat that
yeah,
the people forced their hand. More people voted for
yeah,
cannabis than voted for the governor. That's crazy
yeah,
that weed has more influence on the state of Oklahoma
right.
than the governor choice, man. That is interesting. But that's I know you and I have talked about it. I talk about it a lot on the, just even within the state of Washington where we don't have 2,000 dispensaries and we have more,
Mm,
possible clientele for cannabis, and the inevitable is consolidation and growth,
mm,
and much of the community and the culture is so anti the inevitable, if you will.
mm.
It's a weird clash that we have in just culture and society in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And I know and I know you come really from the culture, you're truly from the community, and you're also in business. And so, do you sometimes feel it puts you in a unique perspective to kind of touch both sides and hear all these things? And also, and I know you're a smart guy, so you see where it's going. And sometimes it's a little, um, sometimes it can be optimistic, and then in certain situations it can be dark, right? When you're looking at what the community and the culture
Yeah.
wants, and you're just like, it's not going to end up the way you guys want.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I always say, this is the sad part, right? Because there are some of us that, have been in other markets. I was in Washington when it went from, medical to recreational, and then all of the medical dispensaries had to get the recreational endorsement. And if you didn't, you had to go through the entire process, and it was just this whole little shit show, right? But if we're not looking at other states' past, how can we truly gauge our future, right? Because if our present is based on their past and we're not looking at the things that made their programs what they are now, we're putting ourselves at a disservice from the gate. So I was talking with someone earlier. I won a award for uh, cultural leader or black leader or whatever it was, and they asked that question, like, do you see the differences, and do you feel like you're in a privileged position? I feel like I'm in a privileged position because I've been in other markets. I've seen where they failed or where they've hit like major hurdles. And then I look at our market and the states that we're based behind, and I look at our failure points that we're rapidly approaching, right? And the thing is that we haven't gotten there yet. So we still have time to change certain things,
Hmm.
but it's hard to get other people to understand things need to be changed because everybody's still so happy and comfortable that we have cannabis, right? But they're not paying attention to the 44 bills that was on a legislative calendar this past session to overly regulate cannabis,
Mm.
and these people aren't participating in these processes to actually have their voices be heard or be a part of a trade association or whatever it is to have a collective voice. They just think that, if they call somebody or if they write a funky email, then people are gonna, jump to their request.
Right.
And it don't work like that. You know what I mean? Like it takes people to actually come together, be able to articulate what their pain points are and provide solutions. Even if they don't go with those solutions, you've provided them a starting point to
Mm.
let them know where they should be looking to go, because at the end of the day, this is new to everybody. Every single legislator, every single regulator, every single patient, with the exception of those that came in from another state. But everybody else that was already here, this brand new. So they got to figure it out. And the thing is if we're not figuring it out together, then those that we've put in power to regulate or legislate us, they're gonna do just that.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
that's the part that sucks because you see where it's going, where it's going. We're hitting all of the checkpoints to hit that disastrous point, and it's hard to get people to you know step away from the comforts of the joint or the comforts of the bong or whatever, to understand that, yeah, I feel you, but we represent 10% of the state, and there's 90% of the state that do not fuck with this program,
Mhm.
you know. And so yeah.
Absolutely, and two, and making change, especially at a regulatory or government level, is. I was just on a conversation with someone earlier out of California that's very active in that, and it's slow and it's small, right? You have to fight
Mhm.
so hard and so long for
Yep.
to get the littlest half inch, right? And
Yep.
pray that that half inch can maybe open up to get the next 6 inches, but it's going to be a while before you get a foot, right?
Right.
Um, it takes a lot of fighting and a lot of effort for that.
Yeah. I mean, it also takes people to be adults. We because we don't have qualifying conditions, people treat our program like it's a rec program, right? So, they out, they doing the Facebook lives, they doing the leaf blower events and all of that good stuff. And while that's adults doing adult shit, right? They still got to understand this is a medical program. So for people who, as far as legislators are concerned, that are against this, um, you're giving them ammunition to go
Mm,
and write one of these 44 pieces of legislation, right? You're giving them all of this ammunition, and while everybody else is, decriminalizing and doing justice reform for people convicted of cannabis convictions, here they're talking about criminalizing it even more for people that share because we're a medical program.
mm,
So it's like, one leaf blower incident from High Times 2019 that killed our 2019 political agenda and our 2020 political agenda. It
mm.
was just this year, 2021, that they were able to finally get past the leaf blower incident. We had a very successful session, right? We got a lot done that we didn't think we would get done, and it was in the benefit of both the state and the people as well as the industry, so it worked for everybody, right? And then right before interim studies, which is going on now, we have another leaf blower incident. And who do the people that are in the political sphere, what do they have to do before we can have a conversation? We have to now diffuse this. Well, I mean, I hear you guys talking about you want home delivery and you want this and you want that, you want consumption lounges, but you guys can't even do right at this because now I'm looking at this, or now here's another leaf blower incident, and it starts us all the way
Mm,
over because people feel like their rights are being infringed upon. I tell people having cannabis isn't a right; it's a luxury.
mm.
It's not a liberty. You know what I mean? That shit can be taken away. It's not a part of our constitution. It can be taken away. They can regulate it down so hard to where you'll need to be a terminal cancer patient and you can now only get products that are 3% THC, and
Right.
there's plenty of states that are like that. So, it's hard, because again, where these trends have led other markets because you were there,
Yeah.
and it sucks. So that's why, the smart ones have been looking at using the hype and the, I guess, popularity from, or the eyes being on Oklahoma to branch into other markets that are a little more stable and a little more sustainable.
Which is a perfect segue where I want to take this conversation going, because that's what you yourself has done, is built a proof of concept in a
Hmm.
singular state. And one of, for one way or another, a very difficult state to grab market share. Clearly, when we're talking
Hmm.
about the size of numbers of
Yeah.
licenses out there. What was kind of, I'm sure that was always the vision, to not be singular state. Obviously, you started in Washington and went to a different market, but what point of the journey did you think, like, I don't want to just do this in a single state. I want to break into multiple markets? Or is that just the goal from day one?
Man, look, day one, I mean, you know the origin story, right?
Yeah.
So day one, I meet Riker, and we met under like a bartering situation where she was managing artists, and I had all of my film equipment and stuff like that up there with me. And I was like, well, shit, how about I do some work for you, for your artists, and you help me structure out this cannabis business? And there was no names, there was no logos, there was no nothing. It was literally just a whiteboard. And she said, well, what's the ultimate goal? And I said, shit, the ultimate goal is to be the Mars of the cannabis industry. She said, why Mars? I said, well, Mars is everything. You know, it's
Mm,
Snickers, it's Big Five gum, it's Bounty napkins, and just going down all the different things that, you know, encompasses the Mars Corporation. And I told her, I said, you know, I want to be able to have products on a shelf beside each other that compete amongst each other without truly competing with each other.
mm,
and
mm.
um and we basically, you know, started to build those bricks backwards. And so that was always like, you know, the objective was always to have this as a household symbol, that regardless of where you were at or whatever product category you liked, if you were a part of this culture, you would know what that is. And so that was a day one thought.
Man, that's awesome. And so you just expanded it. Could you give me, because I can't recall them all and I should have wrote them down before this, but what markets are you now in and when did those expansions start?
Okay, so um, prior to COVID, we had designated 2020 to be the year of the collab, right? And it was like, you know, we had 2018, we entered the market, we had a lot of market share. We went into 2019, we maintained that market share, we opened retail. So now, you know, we're capturing retail dollars as well as, you know, the wholesale distribution dollars. At that point is when we started to look at, you know, how do we how do we get this other places, you know? And it was like all the eyes was on Oklahoma, entrepreneurs writing, you know, uh, articles, Marijuana Ventures writing articles, Cannabis Times is writing articles. It's like Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. Leafly's all about Oklahoma. Weed Map's all about Oklahoma. High Times all about Oklahoma. So we felt like there were true eyes on Oklahoma that normally wouldn't be on Oklahoma, right? And you know, for people that are in more established markets, they know who Chiba Chews is. They know who Smokies is. They know who
Hmm.
Wana is. They know all of these other companies. And it's just like, you know, for if I'm a guy in a market, you know, it's like, you know, music. Perfect example, music. If I'm a guy in a market here, I would be considered local, right? But once I'm known in, you know, Idaho and Oregon, then I become regional, right? So it was like everybody wants to know what's the next best thing, what's the next hot thing, you know? And then when they start to look at that, they're now looking at, well, what makes this one different than this one? Is
Mm.
it the product? Is it the packaging? Is it the marketing? Is it all of it? Like, you know, and so that opened the door for us to have a lot of conversations with people. And it, you know, it originally started off as, you know, co-packing conversations to see, you know, what the opportunities would be to actually like go into other states and manufacture and do all of that good stuff. But it really boiled down to licensing, right?
Yeah.
Um, Coca-Cola don't make all of the Coca-Cola at one factory and then ship it across the country. They have these regional hubs where, or bottling factories, bottling plants, whatever you want to call it, where they bottle the product there and then ship it out to their particular region, right? We wanted to be able to do the same thing. And how we looked at it was, if we don't have to make it, if we don't have to package it, if we don't have to deal with the distribution of it, if we're simply doing the licensing, the training, and the quality assurance behind it, that gives us all the time in the world to focus on marketing, advertising, and sales, right? And where, you know, one state may be a 10% royalty kickback, right? Well, that 10% is in a regulated market where they don't have as many, you know, locations, they don't have as many growers, they don't have as many processors, and those orders are literally 20 times the size of an order for Oklahoma, because we have 1,500 processors and 2,200 dispensaries and 8,000 growers and shit like that. So we actually make more money off licensing than we do off operations. So at that point, that's just where, you know, economics comes into play, and it's just like, okay, so now we start to target markets based on, the length of the program. Arizona was targeted because one, Arizona had a stable medical program before they went adult use. They only have 134 licenses. Majority of the licenses are carried by two entities, and we had an in with both of those entities. So it was an opportunity for us to go in with products that Arizona doesn't have. There's no lollipops in Arizona. There's no caramels in Arizona. When you think of edibles, everything is a gummy.
Mm-hmm,
You know
mm-hmm.
what I mean? And so here we are coming in with a new product category, a new product type that tastes great and is affordable. So it's just like, hey, these cats have won cannabis cups, they doing stuff down in Mexico and blah blah blah. So it's just like, yo, this is the next wave. And that led to, conversations for Michigan, and that led to conversations for Florida, and that led to conversations for New Mexico, and it just kind of did what it did.
It's amazing that is the rise, and just how strategic and how chance, so many different variables
Hmm.
have timing, so many things that you can calculate and be on top of, so many things that you can't, that are just the market or economics, right, that are
Yeah.
out of one's control. It's crazy that your story is just a culmination of all these different things. um, which of these new markets are you most excited of getting into? And the fair answer is all of them, man.
Yes, all of them, but most importantly, Arizona. And the reason that I'm saying Arizona is, it's a snowbird state, right? So they're the height of their tourism and economic growth and all of that stuff. That comes between October and February, March for the most part. And that's not to say that the spring and the summer months aren't growth months, but it's an all year round type of a state, right? And by us being able to go into that market with the market share that we are going in with, it only made great sense to do it that way. And it's really something where we're converting operations, like day-to-day operations, even from Oklahoma. Like we're exploring and moving into more of a licensing status here, and doing the operations in Arizona,
Mm,
simply because it's more stable, it's more profitable. We're able to have more market share and not have to do as much work with way less competitors.
sure.
Um, and I mean, at the end of the day, we'll never abandon this market, because this market truly birthed Mr. Max. It was built, it was conceived in Washington, but Oklahoma actually birthed it. The first Mr. Max products were sold here. So we'll never abandon that piece. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, and this is where people, they get it twisted, because they're usually accustomed to working a 9 to 5, so they don't have that entrepreneurial mentality. And so they're not looking forward. They're not looking at 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now. They're looking at tomorrow. And if you continuously look at tomorrow, you've already lost the game. You ain't even in the game. You sitting in the stands and you think you playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was really just evaluating and just being true with ourselves and what we were trying to do and how we were trying to do it. And that's what made the most sense. Oklahoma will still be home. Oklahoma will still be our headquarters. Our holdings company is based here. So all of our brands, our IP, all of that stuff is based from here. And then that way, anywhere we go, it'll always be, this Oklahoma bred company is who we are, and it sounds and feels way different than a brand coming from California, or a brand coming from Colorado, or something like that. Like, that's cliche at this point.
Right.
You know what I mean? And for us to be able to do what we do at the level that we do it at, it's just the best business sense.
Yeah, I can't. That's a great point. I can't even think of any other brands that I know came from Oklahoma to another market.
Mhm.
It's very much the other way around. That is
Right.
a very
Yep.
unique point.
Yep.
And definitely something to be, for you to be proud of, man, because that's,
For sure.
like I said, I didn't even think of that, but I
Hmm.
know I've never heard that. So,
Yeah.
man, that is awesome, and I appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your journey, because I think there was a lot of games said today on a lot of different levels, um, that I think other brands and people can pay attention to, because you move with intention,
Hmm.
and it's not necessarily just, and again, I know you, I know your journey. It's not just business. You're not a green rusher,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
there's a place for that in this industry. Sure, any industry, anything you talk about, commerce, capitalism, that's a part of it, right? But it's great to see other people capitalize at a high level that can understand that game, but are true, loyal to the soil, man, that are really from it.
Man, I live by a motto that was given to me a long time ago, and it's play your game within the game, right?
Mm,
The game got rules. Football is a game. It has rules, right? A touchdown is 6 points. It don't matter if you run it. It don't matter if you throw it. It don't matter if you intercept it and get a pick six. It's still 6 points. So how you get that touchdown is completely up to you as long as you do it within the confines of the rules of the game. What too many people are trying to do is they're trying to change the game and they ain't even in the game.
mm,
You can't change the game from sitting back looking at the game. Sure, you may know how the game is played. Sure, you may be able to see the length of time that it takes to play that game, but you don't have that IQ to play that position. You don't have that strength and that endurance to do this play after play, game after game, season after season, because you quarterbacking from the bleachers.
mm,
And that's what people are doing. They're trying to change a game that they ain't even in. We create our wave within the game and we ride our wave. That's what we
mm.
do.
That's poetry. That's gospel and poetry at the same
But that's
time.
what we do, man.
So what is next, man? I mean, no, we talked about there's expansion to come. Is there
Mhm.
anything next that you want the people to know? What's the next moves for Mr. Max?
So we're actually about to release a tea. It's a terpene infused tea, herbal tea, premium tea. So not a Lipton or something like that. And they're designed specifically to for certain things, focus, relaxation, etc. And it's using cannabis derived terpenes and other natural elements, lavender, chamomile, et cetera, et cetera. So that brand of tea, I can't announce the name right now. I think we're going to do a name drop on it next week. But we're partnering with another local entity here, another local brand to push that out. Because 2020 got kind of screwed up with COVID. That was the year of our collab,
Mhm.
so we were looking to do more collabs last year. The only thing we really got done last year was the G Pen collab, which is still a big collab.
Major collab.
But we wanted to do some more local things to build more community, more of a local level industry. Because like I know, when the regulations come, and they are coming, when the caps come, they are coming, when the increased license fees come, they are coming. That is what's going to bring all of the other big players into the game to then consolidate everybody else. So the more that people are working with others, the better it puts us and them, positioning moving forward. And with us moving with that mindset of moving or operating here as, a licensor instead of a manufacturer, it's pivotal for us to be able to work with other people because we want to attach some of that respect and some of that goodness that we're doing onto others as well and help bring them up too, because like you said, it's not all about us. We all have, for this to work, we all got to win.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so I can't be focused on me 24/7 if I know 15 other people have to win in order for me to stay where I'm at, because if they
right,
fail, I'm the last man standing. Now I'm against all the giants.
right,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And so people, they really have to think forward. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, we got some cool stuff, coming down with some a beauty care line that my partner and his wife is working on pretty tough. We got some CBD and some Delta 8 stuff that we'll play with while the market is still allowing that. So you know, got some white labeling things that's coming out and moving around off that. Other than that, you know, I got my radio show. Well, it's called Stigma. It's on KOKC 95.3 and streams on iHeartRadio and all that good stuff. And it's about breaking the stigmas behind cannabis and, you know, the culture of cannabis. So that's what I'm up to, man.
Hell yeah, man. All over, but calculate, not all over in a bad way, man.
Strategic as fuck.
Well, man, I greatly appreciate you hopping on this episode today and
Yes,
chopping it
sir.
up with me, man. I look forward to many years of watching one another grow and continually finding some ways where we can work together in harmony on some deeper levels. But that's not for the conversation that we're having right now.
Gotcha.
Um, but man, thank you, Chili. Really appreciate you, my guy.
Man, I appreciate you so much from the bottom of my heart. Like, you have no idea, but you will know. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I believe in any and everybody that helped get this to where it is. Um, I'm looking out for those people. You know what I mean? So be expecting me.
Let's get it. Let's get it, man. Yeah, we'll be
Yes,
talking
sir.
about some of that stuff, man. All right. Thank you very much, man.
Yes,
Appreciate you.
sir.
North America Weed Tour Podcast, episode 32, Chilly Mack of Mr. Macks, and a whole other laundry list of brands. Appreciate you coming from Oklahoma and beyond, my guy.
Yes, sir.